Information this week from our friends at Landlords Zone highlighting something the government's done very quietly in the background, which potentially has a very big impact on landlords. And that's some changes that have been pushed through in relation to Section 21 accelerated possession procedures. Now, what this actually means is at the moment we're in a situation where with Section 8 notices, with Section 21 notices, as a result of coronavirus and the measures the government brought in place, all of these notices have been brought to a 3-month notice period in any case, and there's been a suspension to possession proceedings. However, the change that's been brought through by the government actually has a much more far-reaching and long-term impact. What they've done is they've made it significantly more complicated for landlords overall. There's a lot more paperwork needs to go in, and it casts in doubt the idea of this being called accelerated possession procedure. It looks very, very similar to what's required to go through a Section 8 possession claim at this stage, although at the moment it looks like there still won't be a contested court hearing. There's just a lot more paperwork that needs to be submitted. From what the legislation says, it's now not just the current AST which needs to be submitted, but all ASTs over the history of that tenancy that need to be put in place. There needs to be proof that the deposit was protected. There needs to be proof about when that was protected to show that it was done correctly. There needs to be a declaration signed that there's been no breach of the Tenant Fee Act. So you've kind of got to prove in some way that as a landlord or your agent on your behalf, you didn't ask the tenant for any upfront fees or take a deposit that was greater than what's allowable under the Tenant Fee Act. You also need to submit all EPCs for the property for the duration of the tenancy and all gas safety checks for the duration of the tenancy as well. Now, potentially this could cause an issue if landlords, maybe there's an administrative error, maybe a single gas safety check during the period of a 5-year tenancy was done a day or two outside the criteria, or even just simple things like a plumber misdating a gas safety check or something like that. Human error could cause a big issue for landlords under these new rules. And finally, you need to be able to prove that the first gas safety certificate was issued prior to the tenancy commencing. Now, this has kind of been a contentious area, but it's been in place for a little while, and I've been saying to a lot of landlords to make sure that you're adhering to best practice, and that's really making sure that prior to the tenancy commencing, yourself or your lettings agent is serving on the tenant the current EPC, the current gas safety certificate, the current how to rent guide, or the appropriate versions of the how to rent guide for Scotland or Wales, because each of those territories have their own version of the how to rent guide that's available in England. Making sure you serve all of those prior to the start of the tenancy, and making sure the tenant signs something to show that those things have been served. Now, a professional lettings agent should be doing this on your behalf if you are using a lettings agent as a landlord. If you're doing this yourself, make sure you have a checklist of that. As a landlord, even if you're relying on a lettings agent to do this, do make sure that you're collecting for yourself some evidence that this has been done. Now, at this stage, this legislation, as I mentioned, has been quietly pushed through while everyone's worrying about the coronavirus crisis. It is subject to a Supreme Court challenge at the moment. We're waiting to see what's going on with that at this stage. And something else that you may be interested in, earlier on in the year, I recorded a video with Paul Champlina from Landlord Action, Nightmare Tenants and Slum Landlords, and also brand ambassador for Hamilton Fraser, talking about Section 21 and some of the proposed changes from the government, the impact that they might have on the rental industry overall. I'll put the link to that video in the comments section below.